All right. Hey, everyone, future PhDs. What languages? We're going to be looking at excerpts from Linguistics for Dummies.
Linguistics for everyone.
Yes, zeroing in on the stuff that'll actually help you stand out in that exam room.
For sure.
Okay, so first things first, right? Imagine a world without any language.
Oh, wow.
It's like more than just words, you know? It's like what makes us human, right?
Absolutely.
And Linguistics for Dummies goes into this by outlining 6 core traits of human language.
Right.
And the first one, arbitrariness.
Yeah.
Always kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
It is. Like, why is a dog called a dog? There's no, like, logical reason.
It's brilliant, really.
It is.
This arbitrariness, it allows for so much flexibility.
Right.
Think about it, like dog, the word dog doesn't have any inherent dogness.
Right.
It's just a sound we've all decided, okay, this is dog.
Right, we agreed on it.
But that agreement, it lets us create tons of words for anything we can think of.
Oh, I see what you mean.
We don't have to be limited, by needing them to sound or look like the thing itself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like in French, it's chien, and in Japanese, it's inu.
Right. Different sounds, same furry friend.
Exactly. And it's not just words, it's like the whole structure of language.
Oh, yeah, Linguistics for Dummies talks about this hierarchical structure, right?
Yes.
Sounds building up to words, then phrases, and then bam sentences.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
But for language. And it's a universal concept, too, no matter what language.
Oh, cool.
English, Mandarin, Swahili, you're using that same structure to create meaning.
Wow, so we've got these building blocks and this ability to combine them in all these ways, but...
There have to be some rules, right?
Right. It's like language is a game. We all got to be playing by the same rule book.
Absolutely. That rule book is what linguists study.
Okay, so what's in the rule book?
Well, things like phonetics, phonology, morphology.
Whoa, okay, those sound a little intimidating.
Well, they might sound complex, but
Okay.
think of them as different levels of the game, you know?
Oh, okay, I like that.
Like phonetics is about the sounds we make, right?
Okay.
And phonology, that's how those sounds work together.
I see.
Morphology, well, that's about how we form words.
Gotcha.
They're like the underlying principles that make language work, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And linguistics, for everyone, they jump into a really big question here.
Ooh, what's that?
They ask, can animals learn language too?
Well, that's a good one.
It is. And they talk about those famous chimpanzee studies.
Oh, yeah, Washu and Nimchimsky, right?
Exactly. Seems like every linguist has an opinion on those.
Yeah. Like, is it just mimicry, or are they really getting the meaning and the grammar?
Right. That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
So linguistics for everyone highlights these things called Hockett's design features,
Okay.
which are kind of like a checklist for what counts as language,
Gotcha. So what's on the checklist?
Well, one of the key ones is displacement.
Displacement, okay.
Humans, we can talk about things that aren't right in front of us.
Oh, right, like the past, the future, stuff like that.
Exactly. But a vervet monkey, they might have a call for leopard,
Okay.
but only when the leopard is right there.
Oh, I see.
They can't warn each other about a leopard that might be around tomorrow.
Right, so we could basically time travel with language.
Exactly. And then there's productivity.
Productivity, okay.
It's the ability to just make up new sentences we've never heard before.
Oh, like I could say, the purple unicorn ate a taco on the moon.
Right.
Total nonsense.
But you understand it.
Yeah.
Because of the rules of English.
Right, because of the rules. That's so cool.
And that's a big point. Even nonsense can be grammatical.
I never thought of it like that.
It's one of the things that sets human language apart.
Okay, I'm starting to see why these design features are so important.
They give us a framework for understanding what makes human language, well, human.
Okay, now let's talk grammar.
Right.
I remember in high school, grammar was all about, like, rules and correctness and all that.
Yeah, the dreaded grammar lessons.
Right. But linguistics, for everyone, they talk about this other perspective.
What's that?
Descriptive versus prescriptive grammar.
Yes, that's a crucial distinction.
It is. It's like what people should say versus what they actually say, right?
Exactly. Think of it like this. Prescriptive grammar is like that super strict teacher.
Oh, I know the type.
Right. Insists on perfect punctuation, never ending a sentence with a preposition.
Oh, yeah.
But descriptive grammar, well, it's like that cool anthropologist.
Okay, I like this anthropologist better.
They're fascinated by how language is actually used, even if it breaks the rule.
Right, so, like, some of us say ain't is wrong, But the anthropologist would be more interested in like where that word came from, how it's used.
Exactly. They're not judging, they're observing.
That's a much better approach, I think.
It's crucial for anyone studying language, really.
Makes sense.
It lets you step back from your own ideas of, good or bad English.
Oh, yeah. So you can be more objective.
Precisely.
And linguistics for everyone.
Yeah.
They give a great example with double negatives.
Oh, yeah, like I don't got none.
Right. Some dialects use them, some don't.
Yeah, prescriptively, someone might say two negatives make a positive,
But descriptively, it's just a different way of saying the same thing, right?
Exactly. And it's important to remember, especially as you're studying English and prepping for your PhD,
Right.
these variations in grammar, they aren't mistakes.
Okay, I see what you mean.
They're evidence of how diverse and rich language really is.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah. And especially with English, right? There's just so much variation.
Oh, totally. It's not just one thing, right? It's like a whole bunch of dialects.
It is. It's a collection of all these varieties, each with its own little quirks.
It's like when you hear someone with a different dialect, maybe they use different words or their grammar is a little different.
Right.
It's still English, but it's like their own flavor of it.
Exactly. And understanding these variations, it's so important for anyone studying linguistics, especially when you get into more specialized areas.
Like what?
Well, sociolinguistics or dialectology.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It's a whole other level.
Totally. Okay, speaking of specialized areas,
Yeah.
let's talk about one of the most mind-blowing concepts.
Ooh, which one?
Universal grammar.
Ah, yes, the big UG.
Right. Linguistics for everyone suggests there's this underlying blueprint for language.
We're pre-wired for it.
Yeah, we're not starting from scratch.
Right, exactly. And it helps explain why kids can learn language so fast no matter what language it is.
That's so true. They pick it up so quickly.
It's incredible, right? They're building on this innate foundation.
Okay, so instead of just memorizing rules, we're tapping into something that's already in our brains.
That's the idea.
That's wild.
It is. And it's not just the basics either, universal grammar. It also helps explain how we learn more complex grammar.
Really?
Yeah. So there's this idea of parameters.
Parameters, okay.
They're switches that can be flipped on or off.
Okay.
Depending on the language you're learning.
I see. So different languages have different settings.
Exactly.
Linguistics for everyone talks about null subjects, which always tricks me up.
Oh, yeah. Null subjects can be tricky.
They are. It's like in English, you have to say, I am hungry. But in Italian, you can just say, non voglio mangiare, don't want to eat, and it's understood.
Exactly. It's the subject pronoun switch is off in Italian.
Oh, I see. So it's a small difference, but it changes how the whole grammar works.
Precisely. So all these variations we see in languages, they're not just random. They're different combinations of these parameter settings.
It's like a linguistic puzzle.
It is. And for you guys studying English as a second language,
Yeah.
this can be super helpful for understanding those weird English grammar things.
Oh, tell me about it.
By comparing the parameter settings of English to your native language,
Right.
you can start to see why English grammar is the way it is.
That's a really good point, yeah. So instead of just memorizing.
So you're understanding the deeper structure.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about the building blocks, the rules, the blueprint in our brains.
Right.
But how do linguists actually study all this stuff? They're not just sitting around thinking about grammar all day, right?
Well, some days maybe, but...
Right, but seriously. Linguistics for Dummies talks about using real data,
Of course.
actual language samples, to back up their theories.
You can't just make pronouncements about language without evidence.
Right, you got to have proof. So what kind of data do they use?
Well, linguists have all sorts of methods. It's like a whole toolbox.
Ooh, give me the inside scoop.
All right, so one approach is using corpora.
Corpora.
They're basically these huge collections of language data.
Like what?
Oh, you name it. Texts, transcripts, conversations.
Wow, so a giant library of language?
Exactly. Think of it like that.
So instead of just relying on their own intuition?
They can see how people are really using language.
That makes sense, yeah. It's like real-world data.
Exactly. They can use these corpora to study all sorts of things like word frequency, grammatical patterns, or how language varies across different groups of people.
Oh, that's cool. So corpora is for the big picture stuff. But what about when they want to get more specific?
Okay.
How do they figure out the rules of a particular dialect, for example?
Well, that's where elicitation comes in.
Elicitation. Okay.
It's more hands-on. They work directly with speakers of the language.
So like they're doing field work, like anthropologists.
In a way, yeah. They might ask speakers to translate sentences, judge if something is grammatical, or describe how they use language in certain situations.
Oh, I see. So they're really getting into the nitty-gritty.
They are. It helps them get data on those subtle things. You know, like the little nuances of grammar or pronunciation.
Like detective work for language.
It can be, yeah. And then there's experimentation.
Experimentation. Okay.
This is where they use more controlled methods to study language processing.
Oh, interesting.
They might track eye movements when people read.
Wow.
Or use brain imaging to see what parts of the brain light up when we do language stuff.
That's getting into some serious science.
It is. But it makes sense. Language is a product of the brain, after all.
Right. It all comes back to the brain.
It does. And all these methods, corpora, elicitation, experimentation, they all work together. They give linguists a more complete understanding of how language works, both in our minds and in the world.
That makes sense. Yeah, you need all the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. And for you guys, as future PhD students, understanding these methods, it's going to be key.
Yeah, I bet.
You'll be expected to not just understand the research that's already out there, but to do your own research.
Wow, that's a big step.
It is. You'll be analyzing data, contributing new knowledge to the field.
So it's like you're not just learning about language, you're becoming a language scientist.
That's a great way to put it. And as you delve deeper into these scientific aspects of language, you'll start to see this fascinating connection between language and the brain.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's mind-blowing to think that all these like abstract rules and structures, they're actually physically encoded in our brains somehow.
It's incredible, right? And this language center, it's not just one spot.
Oh, really?
It's a whole network, different areas working together.
So like different parts of the brain handle different parts of language.
Exactly. Like sound, meaning, grammar, even the social context.
Wow. So it's like a whole orchestra of brain regions.
Yeah. Perfect analogy. And this orchestra, it's super adaptable too.
Oh, that's good to know.
Our brains are constantly rewiring as we learn new languages, encounter new dialects.
So our brains are always changing.
They are. It's called neuroplasticity.
Oh, yeah.
And it's what lets us keep growing as language learners, even as adults.
That's good news for me. Still working on mastering English.
Well, you're in good company. But it shows just how dynamic language is.
Yeah.
It's not just a fixed system. It's a living process shaped by our brains and how we interact with the world.
That's a cool way to think about it. Yeah.
And speaking of those interactions, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier.
Okay.
The power of language to shape who we are and how we see the world.
Linguistics for everyone makes that point, right?
Yeah.
Language isn't just a neutral tool.
It carries cultural values, social norms, even political ideologies,
It's a lens through which we perceive reality.
It really is,
Think about how different cultures have different words for emotions.
Oh, right. Or different ways of addressing elders. Those linguistic differences, they reflect deeper cultural differences.
That's a good point, yeah. And then there's that whole debate about language and thought.
Yes, the classic question.
Does the language we speak actually affect how we think?
The chicken and the egg, right.
Right. Linguists have been arguing about this forever.
And there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
But what's important is to be aware of these complexities.
Okay.
To understand that language. It's never truly neutral.
Right. It's always loaded with meaning.
Exactly. And to think critically about how language can be used to include or exclude people, to empower or to marginalize.
That's a really important point, yeah, especially as we're prepping for our PhDs.
It is. This critical lens, it's something you'll keep developing.
I'm sure, yeah.
It's about seeing language not just as a set of rules, but as this powerful force that shapes how we see the world, our relationships, even our societies.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's a key takeaway for anyone studying English as a second language, too.
Oh, definitely.
You're not just learning new words and grammar.
Right.
You're immersing yourself in a whole new culture, a new way of seeing things.
It's like opening up a whole new world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's an incredibly enriching experience.
It is. Yeah, it really is. And, as you guys are immersing yourselves in English, getting ready for those PhD exams, you'll start to see this evolution of language firsthand.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Linguistics for Dummies points out this crazy fact, like, despite all the diversity out there, languages actually share some, really fundamental traits.
They do. It's like they all came from a common ancestor way back in time.
It's like tracing a family tree.
It is. But instead of genes, we're looking at sounds, structures, even vocabulary.
Wow, so those ancient connections are still visible in the languages we speak today.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
That is. And especially for those of us studying English as a second language, right?
Oh, absolutely.
English has borrowed so much from other languages like Latin, French, Norse, Greek.
You had a real melting pot.
It is. So knowing about these influences, it can give you a deeper understanding of why English is the way it is.
For sure, like knowing that the word education comes from the Latin educere, which means to lead out.
Okay.
That can totally change your perspective on what learning is all about.
I love that. It's like language is a time capsule carrying these ancient ideas into the modern world.
It really is. And for anyone prepping for a PhD, understanding these historical connections, it's super helpful.
How so?
Well, it helps you see patterns, make connections that you might not have noticed before.
Oh, I see. Like you're getting the whole backstory.
Exactly. And that brings us to maybe the most intriguing question of all.
Ooh, what's that?
So if we all share this universal grammar blueprint,
Like linguistics for everyone talks about it.
no, are there limits to what languages can even exist?
Whoa, okay, that's a big one. Like, are there certain languages our brains just can't handle?
It's a question that keeps linguists up at night. Some believe there might be these, universal constraints on language structure based on, the limitations of our brains.
So even with all the amazing diversity of language, there might be boundaries we can't cross.
It's definitely possible. But exploring those boundaries, figuring out what's possible and what's not, that's part of what makes linguistics so fascinating.
It's like the ultimate challenge.
It is. So as future PhDs, you're not just inheriting a field of study, you're stepping into this ongoing exploration
Of the very nature of language.
and the human mind.
That's incredible. And all this knowledge you're gaining, it's not just about passing an exam, right?
Right. It's about giving you the tools to analyze, to understand, to contribute to this field that's always changing.
Like you're not just learning about language, you're becoming part of the conversation.
Exactly. It's about seeing the world through this linguistic lens.
Yeah.
Using that perspective to make new discoveries, ask even bigger questions.
So keep asking those questions, future PhDs. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into linguistics. We hope you found it helpful, maybe even a little bit mind-blowing. And good luck with those exams. Keep those brains buzzing.
Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future videos.